on the CQLS YouTube page and the archive page at the end of today. Brenda, I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself and get going here in about 10 seconds. If there's any cleanup, just if you have any questions, you can chat in the box and I can respond to them. You can also unmute your mic if you feel the need to jump in. We're welcome to any questions. But if you type them in the chat, I will read them out to the group. So either way, to ask your questions, you can unmute your mic or you can type in the chat and we'll get you. All right, Brenda, I will hand it off to you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Mary Beth, for asking me to do this session on effective time management for busy library staff. I think Mary Beth shared a handout with everyone, and I'll refer to that throughout the session. The first thing on that handout is this visualized success. So you're here, you came to this session, this topic appealed to you for a reason. So what is it that you would like to be better? If your time and task management were more effective, what would that look like? What would it feel like? What would be different? And so I'll just ask you to think about that as we begin, and then we'll talk about some different strategies. Okay, so we have 7 things that we're going to talk about today, 7 different strategies or topics related to time management, and these correspond to what is on your handout. Okay. Everything. Okay, but before we do that, I just have 5 beliefs about time management that I'm going to share as we get started. And the first one is that we each have our own unique relationship with time. As I have talked about and taught different sessions on time management, taught online courses that last several weeks, I realized that what works for one person is not always necessarily what will work for another. Our relationship with time, the way we feel about it, the strategies that work for us is really personal. And so you might have someone who they've discovered bullet journals, and so they just love that, and you might look at it and realize that it's not at all for you. As we go through this session today, I hope that you'll find some strategies and things that sound useful to you, but I don't expect that all of them will. I'm hoping that you'll pick and choose the things that make sense for you and where you're at and where you want to be. This is, of course, from The Godfather, but one of the quotes from that I think about with time management is, "It's not personal, it's business." And that's, I would say with time management, that it does not hold true. That when people are thinking about time management or wanting to work on time management, it's almost always holistic, where you can't just focus on one little aspect of it. You can as a starting point, but I think when you're trying to identify what changes you want to make, that it requires looking at both things on a personal level and then things in the workplace. And so as we're talking about strategies, as we're looking at different things, you might be thinking about them for your work at the library, but you might also be thinking about them in terms of your personal life and finding balance there. Another core belief about time management is that time management skills can be learned. So I think we somehow think there are people who are good at this, and there are people for whom it comes maybe a bit more naturally, or it's more fits their personality. But the whole reason that I wrote a book on this and have been doing training on this is because I've realized that there are lots of skills that we can learn, and that it's not something that we're either good at or not, but it's something we can be learning and improving all of the time. Change is inevitable, of course, and I think that's important. What I have discovered as I work on time management is that this becomes a priority for people during times of change. And it might be, for me, it was when my son was born. I felt overwhelmed by trying to juggle so many things at that point. And so that's when I really started looking at time management and different tools that I could try, different things that I could do to make it work. And it could be maybe you got a promotion, or maybe the staff size at your library has changed. It could be a health problem that means you have less energy, lots of different things. But I find that often at times of change, people are drawn to thinking about or wanting to make some changes to time management too. And it can be you who just wants to change. So maybe no external circumstances have changed, but you want to feel less stressed, or you want to feel more on top of things. So it might be internally that you're seeking that change. Time management can lead to greater creativity and innovation. I think that I used to think that if I wanted to be creative and innovative, that had nothing to do with time management, and that time management was about things like being on time to appointments and paying bills on time, that sort of thing. But actually what I've discovered is that they're really interrelated, and that your ability to do creative things, interesting things, innovative things really depends on good time management and prioritizing and identifying the things that are important, and then prioritizing making time for them. So we'll talk about that throughout the session. And again, time management's not just, it's important, and not only in our workplace but also in our personal lives. It really has a big impact on our happiness, our stress, even our health. Okay, well, let's dive in. So those are 5 things that I wanted to share. Another thing that I'll add, maybe as a 5.5 or a 6, is that it's good to talk about it. That time management, you might not think of it as a dinner party conversation, but actually I think it's really good to create a culture where we're talking about the strategies that work for each of us, or what's going on with us with time management. We can learn things from each other, and there are specific circumstances, I think, in which it's really good to talk about it. So I think if you in your library are watching this with others, and then we'll have the shared language, some of the tools that you can talk about, that can be really, really powerful. So talking about it with others is really important. Okay, well, let's start with our 7 topics. And again, these correspond to the handout. And so the first thing that I would like to talk about is the importance of timing. So here, true or false, research shows that the best time to participate in a workshop is right after lunch. And I'm guessing most of you know false. If you've been in workshops, and I know as a person who delivers lots of workshops that you have kind of that dreaded time right after lunch when everybody is just really, really sleepy. This is a book by Daniel Pink, and he's an author. He's written books on motivation. But his latest book is called When: The Scientific Secrets of Perfect Timing. And it's all about how much timing impacts our time management, impacts our energy, impacts our physical health. I'll talk a little bit more about that. So specifically, one of the things he says is that afternoons, he calls them the Bermuda Triangles of our days, because and this is in general, not everyone is the same, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but in general, lots of people, there's a time in the early afternoon when you are not alert, your energy level is low, your mood is not as good. And so he calls those Bermuda Triangles of our days, when we aren't exactly sure what we accomplished during that time. So this is for lots of people. Again, I'm going to talk about how it's not everybody, but for lots of us, we have a peak in the morning when we're positive mood, we've got more energy, our mental capacity is better. Then it kind of goes down, that's that trough, and then it rebounds again in the evening. And again, that's not for everybody. There are others who actually experience this in reverse. So they wake up and that's kind of their recovery, and then they go through a trough and then they peak. So we all have a hidden pattern of daily life, and Pink divides us up into larks, owls, and third birds. So larks are those morning people who wake up and are ready in the morning for analytic tasks. They wake up in a good positive mood. Then we also know owls, so people who they really feel like they're at their best in late afternoon or evening. But then he also has a group that he calls third birds, and this is actually where I would put myself. It's kind of somewhere in the middle between those. And I know for me, my best time to do what I would call thinking work, where I need to be sharp, where I maybe need to be creative or analytical or insightful, I'm good about 10 in the morning is kind of my ideal time for that. And then I definitely have that afternoon trough where it takes me a lot longer to accomplish things, and it's harder to come up with creative ideas. And there's actually a growing body of research looking at this, looking at circadian rhythms and how there are these patterns through our day that really impact things like our blood pressure, depression, things like that, that there's if we are not able to follow our circadian rhythms, that it can have a negative impact on our health. And so you're probably wondering, well, that sounds good, but what can I do about that? I work at the library these hours, so you can't say my circadian rhythms indicate it's a perfect time for a nap, but I think that there are some things that you can do, even if it's small changes that you can make. Excuse me. So for example, if you kind of become aware of your own rhythms, then you can do things. So for example, a librarian that I talked to was going in the mornings, she was doing things like running her errands, like going to the bank, or if she had to go to the post office, things like that. She was using her morning time to do that. And she realized she's like me, that was kind of her best mental capacity time. And so just shifting, doing those sorts of tasks to the afternoon helped. And so then she was saving her morning for those more mental tasks, and then afternoon for times when she did not need to be as sharp, and it was actually good for her to be moving around. So an important thing with time management that we have to remember is that it's also energy management. And this picture, I'm sure, is familiar to a lot of you. This is Hermione and from Harry Potter. And the reason that I include this is because you may remember, those of you who are fans of the Harry Potter series, in the third book, third year at Hogwarts, she gets a time turner, which is a necklace, and it allows her to be in two places at once. And so she's not just taking a full load of courses, she's taking like a double full load of courses. And she thinks this will be great because she has more time in the day, but what happens is she's completely exhausted, she's frazzled. So just having enough or having more time isn't the answer. We also need to think about our energy, both physical energy and mental energy, as we're thinking about time management, thinking about how to make the most of those. So again, timing is important, and like I said, more and more research is being done on this and how it impacts things. For example, in schools, they've been looking at time and how it impacts things. And so a small example would be math, that it's better to do math in the morning and then save maybe language arts until the afternoon, because for lots of kids, that's better. Of course, lots of you have probably heard about later start times for high school students, because our circadian rhythms, or those rhythms, change throughout our lives too. And I know I used to be a night person when I was in late teens, early 20s, I was more of a night person, and now certainly am not. So these things change over time too, and as high school students in particular stay up late, it's biological, and so switching school start times to be later has been effective in places where they've been able to try that. So I think there's lots of interesting research into this, and on an individual level, I think we can think about our own flow. Some of us know this about ourselves, we know, but maybe paying more attention to it and even becoming more aware. I have an app on my phone. I have a crossword puzzle, and I also have a trivia app that I do. And it's very interesting to me how throughout the day, I pull out my crossword puzzle when I have downtime. And so I might be waiting at the doctor's office for an appointment, or I often do it before I go to bed at night, do a little bit of my crossword puzzles. But it's interesting to me that I can look at a crossword puzzle at certain times when I think I'm not very mentally sharp. I'm in a trough, and I'm not getting any of them. And then the next day I happen to look at the same crossword puzzle, and I'm in a better place with that, and I'm getting lots of them. So it's to me has really highlighted how we really are different, what we're best for at different times of the day. Okay, any questions or thoughts on that? I think I've lost the chat, but
I don't see any in the chat yet, but
okay.
I'll jump in if I see any come through.
Okay, great. All right, and so again, some of us know that. We kind of are self-aware, but I do think there's a lot that can be learned from tracking how you spend your time. And that would be the second time management strategy or suggestion, is to keep a time log, not on an ongoing basis necessarily, but just maybe for a day or two even, to keep a time log. So just a piece of paper where you jot down what you do throughout the day. On the worksheet, I mentioned Laura Vanderkam, and she's a researcher and author who has written several books on this. One of them is called 168 Hours, and that's looking at that we all have 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we have 168 hours. And as part of her research, she has interviewed, or she's actually had tons of people, thousands and thousands of people keep time logs, and then they analyze them. And so she's really kind of found some interesting things about how people spend their time. There's actually a government department, the US Bureau of Labor Statistics has something called the American Time Use Survey, and they do the same thing. They have people keep time logs. And so this is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. This is the average for people who have kids and are 25 to 54. And they have statistics on lots of different demographic groups. This is just what I happened to pull. But this is how much in an average day a person spends working, sleeping, doing leisure things. So it's kind of interesting just to see what the trends are, to see what others do, to think about what we do. It does look at reading and how much time people spend reading, and so people who work in libraries might be above the average there. So just interesting to know that people are looking at these statistics. But as you think about this for yourself, the benefits of time logging, or why you might want to do this. So we are notoriously bad at estimating how much time we spend doing things. And I mentioned Laura Vanderkam, the author I mentioned on the worksheet too, the handout. But in these time logs, so she had them estimate how long they were spending on different things. And what people discovered is that when they kept a time log, they realized that their estimates were not right, that they actually were doing some things less and some things more than they thought. So when you keep a time log, you understand how you're spending your time. You can really see that where you're spending your time, and then as you do that, you'll have a better ability to estimate how long things take, which is a key skill of time management, is being able to estimate how long things are going to take. You'll be able to see if you have time wasters, and I think some time wasters are okay. Of course, we want to do them, but if you're doing more of them than you want to, that's useful. So we can be more mindful, and then also identify accomplishments, because I know sometimes I've heard lots of people say, especially in busy libraries, that they get to the end of the day and they have been going, and they're wondering what exactly it is that they accomplished. And when they have the time log, it can help them to see and realize that. So I have a couple of quotes from library people. So it can help us get more realistic. So you might have things like, this is a library manager who always dreaded these monthly reports that she had to do. And so she would put them off, she would procrastinate, they really loomed large. But when she actually logged how long it took, she realized that she was exaggerating when she thought about the demand that made on her schedule. And she saw that it actually took her less time. She realized that if she sat down and focused on it for half an hour, that she could get it done, and that for her relieved some anxiety. So she just worked on it, and instead of worrying about it. This is someone who is doing library technology classes, so some training in the library for the public. And when he first started doing this, he was in his schedule kind of giving himself about an hour or two to plan. So if he was doing a new class, he was giving himself an hour or two to plan that. And he realized that if it was a new class, that it really took him a whole lot longer than that to plan it.
Brenda, we do have a
Oh,
question
good.
in the chat.
Okay.
Do you think if you kept a time log, you might change how you spent your day on those days as opposed to actual, how you spent your day on those days as opposed to actual, since you were aware? So I think this is kind of a group question.
Yep, definitely. Yes, I think you would. There's that, what is that called? The Hawthorne effect in research, where they've discovered that when doing research, if people are aware they're being watched, they'll alter their behavior to, do what they think the researcher wants. So yes, I do think that if you are keeping a time log, you might be doing things a little bit differently, but you would probably be doing them better, because you would be trying, you'd want to be logging your time the way you thought it should be. So I guess I don't see it as a negative consequence, but so yes, I think you will probably, or could, I've certainly had people say that they did, that when they knew that they were going to have to log it, that maybe they didn't spend the time on Facebook or other things that maybe they normally did but didn't want to, because they were being more self-conscious about how they were using their time. So I still think it can be useful, because it really has you focusing on and becoming aware of your time. So you might change it, but maybe that won't necessarily be a bad thing, if that makes sense.
I think that makes sense. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
There's another question. Is there an alternative to time logging for those who get anxiety or panic attacks by time logging?
Yeah, I've had other people say that too, that it makes them feel really anxious. One idea that I like is, so if one thing that you could do is maybe just log the amount of time you spend doing a certain thing. And so I'm thinking of, for example, let's say you are you're planning your children's library and you're planning a story time. Maybe just log how much time you spend on that, or choose some different things that you're wanting to get really clear about. So instead of feeling like you have an eye watching you, or an internal critic or judge watching how you're spending every minute, maybe just start by focusing on some of the things that you're not really sure how much time you spend on. Another thing you can do, so, and again, this is all individual, but let's say what you wonder about is how much time you're spending on social media. So if you feel like, oh, I feel like I probably waste more time on Facebook than I should, and this probably would be personal life, you can actually, there is software that you can, definitely we have this on our phones. I know Apple or iPhone users have it maybe built in. I have an Android. On Android, there are different apps you can install, and it just runs in the background. And then you can go in and look at a report, and it shows you how many minutes you spent on Facebook, how many minutes you spent doing email. So it's a way where you don't have to be doing it, but again, you might feel the anxiety just knowing it's running in the background. So time logging probably is not for everyone, because it does. I've had people really love time logging and think that it has really helped them become aware of where they had maybe things that they were spending too much time on, and they wanted to shift that. And then I've had other people really dislike time logging and feeling, I think, that same sense of anxiety. And so I think that my big suggestion would be maybe just try it in certain areas. So if you're looking at personal and professional life, it might be exercise. If you just want to track, well, how many minutes do I actually exercise a week? Or how many minutes do I spend watching TV, if you feel like that might be a time waster? Or like I said, the social media. Or if it's in the workplace, if you feel like you spend a lot of time in meetings or chatting with coworkers, maybe in a way that is distracting you from the other things you want to do, maybe actually keeping track of that can be helpful. So I think it's going to be different from person to person, what makes the most sense, where this might be the most helpful. And I think if we can just see it as a flashlight, shining a light on things, but not changing them, but just helping us to see better what it is that we're doing.
I have 2 more comments. I think
Okay.
I think that was very helpful. One user says, my circadian rhythm says that CQLS workshop should be at 10 p.m.
10 p.m. Oh my gosh. Wow.
Which I'm a night owl too, so I get that.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm not going to do it at 10 a.m. or 10 p.m. And then the other question is that they're requesting the access to the PowerPoints to be able to print off for later. So
yeah, definitely.
yeah. So if she shares them, if Brenda shares them with me, I'll send them out to everybody.
Yep, definitely. I'll send that to you after. Good.
Thank you, Brenda.
Sure. Okay, so this is just a director of a small rural library, and she said, I feel like rushing around like a chicken with its head cut off, keeping the time log helped me see that I really do accomplish a lot in a day. So if you do decide to keep a time log, I think it's useful to notice not only what you did exactly, but maybe how you felt too. So, I was working on some program planning, I was really in the zone, tried working on an article for the newsletter, not feeling creative. So I think if you're wanting to identify some of that, some of your flow through the day, I think that using your time log by kind of noting your energy level is also good. And the time log can help you identify external things that impact your flow too. So public library I worked in, and at 3 o'clock I would not be working on the newsletter, because I knew that around 3 o'clock things were going to get really, really busy because kids would get out of school. And so you can become aware of that, but also maybe even smaller things in the flow of whether it's the public coming into the library, things with other staff. So it can just kind of help you see where there might be those pockets when it's best for some of that more focused time that all of us need. Okay, so people have already been sharing on this, but I am curious if you've ever tracked time. Has anyone ever done this? Are you interested in doing it? And if you did it, would you track work only, or would you track personal?
I'm going to give some people some time to chat in the box, but I'll give my personal experience. I have tried day tracking. I used a online account called Toggle, where
Mm-hmm.
you just tell it what you're doing, and then you click track, and then you can go on about your day. So there's a little bit of you putting in the information, and then it tracks what you do.
Yeah.
Instead of it watching what you do, it's just you tell it what you're doing, and then you click time, and it sets a timer for you, or a stopwatch, and tells you how long you worked on it. That works okay, except when I get distracted with things and I go off and do other things, I don't take
Right.
the time to time log that.
Yeah.
And then I do have a fitness app which tells me how long I run. I think it's Argus is the one I use for the fitness one, and that one, it can sense when I'm running, so then it
Mm-hmm.
starts timing automatically, which I think is a little bit creepy.
Yeah.
And then there's also sleep ones that know when you fall asleep, and they can track when you have light sleep and deep sleep and all that kind of stuff. And I tried that
Mm-hmm.
once or twice, and I didn't I didn't like that it knew that much about me, so I
Yeah.
turned it off. So the time management one that I've been using, Sherry, is called Toggle, TOGGL.com, and it's a free account, and you can sign up for one, and then you set up your categories, like storytime planning, newsletter writing, board meeting prep, all those kind of stuff. And then you just kind of type what you're doing and put it in the category, and then click play, which starts your stopwatch. The other one I've tried is Aware, which you put on your computer, and then you set like how often you want to break, because it always says to get up from your desk and walk around about every 10 minutes. And that one just kind of resets a timer every 60 minutes to remind you to get up and walk around. Okay, questions. For the first few weekly assignments for my classes, I tend to track the time it takes to complete my work for the week. So that's one where you're starting something new, and you just track it while you're getting used to it. And then somebody else says, at a previous employer, I tracked time for every 6 minutes for billing, and that kept you on task for every
Yeah.
6 minutes. I would be interested to know why it was 6 minutes and not something like 5 or 10. And then somebody else says, Danielle says, in my old job where I had lots of varied tasks in different databases, I tracked each different task all throughout the workday.
Yep.
Steve was the one that tracked for every 6 minutes, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. I guess it's because it's 0.10 of an hour. So when you're doing your hours by decimal points, that's why you do every 6 minutes. And Danielle, I'd like to hear a little bit more about your tracking and how you felt about it, and were you able to make changes? So.
Yeah, I think there are lots of the legal profession is one, others where they're tracking all the time. It's just a way that people do things. It's how things run.
Yeah, I know like contractors and people that are contract out their work have to kind of track by the minute. So
Yeah.
it makes sense why they need to track so heavily.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, Steve does confirm that it's 1/10 of an hour is 6 minutes. So I guess now when you say that way, Steve, I guess it makes sense.
For me, when I was doing, this is Danielle, when I was doing my tracking, it actually, because I was going from, I had like 4 different databases I was working in, and then I was also trying to track my time. It actually added to my stress level because I felt like I was having to do so much more because I was going into one database and tracking the time, and then I was going into another. So it felt more chaotic to me because I was doing so much and trying to track all over the place, I guess.
Okay. Yeah.
I could see that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's where if you want something to change. So if it is just what it is, then it's maybe there isn't a need to track, or you're doing it for the work. But if, for example, the personal life stuff and fitness, that's where it comes up. If people are feeling like I don't have time to exercise, it's the kind of thing where then can help you realize, well, actually, I have these pockets of time that I could use for exercise. And same thing in the workplace. If you feel like you're spending too much time on one thing or something that's not a priority, then it can help you become aware of that. That's actually a good lead into the next part of this, which is identifying those priorities. And I always like this, Alice in Wonderland, would you tell me please which way I ought to go from here? And the Cheshire Cat says that depends a good deal on where you want to get to. And so you might do a time log and feel like it looks good, you're being really effective, you're doing stuff all day long, you're meeting deadlines, but if what you are doing is not not what you want to be doing, or is not a priority, then you're always going to be struggling with how you use your time. So when you're looking at your time log, if you do decide to do that, you might, as you're analyzing it, be thinking about what do you want to keep doing, what do you want to change, what do you want to do more. Some people have also found it useful to look at what they want to stop doing. So to create a stop doing list, there just is not enough time to do everything. And so you may need to make decisions about what you're not going to do too. I remember one woman who, she had been promoted. She had been in technical services in a little bit larger library. She'd been in technical services and she was promoted to manager. And she was just not, her time management was not going well. And she realized that she was trying to do almost everything that she had been doing in her old job plus her new job. And so she just realized that she had to let a lot of what she had done in her old job go and kind of embrace the new job.
I think that's a really good point, is when you do add something in, you have to take something out, because there's limited amounts in the day and the week. I did have one more comment. Eric says, I use the screen time apps for my Android and iPad. So that's what they're called. And if you go into settings, you can see your screen time app. And then Fitbit for my active minutes.
Good. Yeah, technology will probably keep developing, and so we'll have these kind of built-in ways where we don't have to be taking our piece of paper and noting things, but it might even start to do things like recording our blood pressure, as we're talking about the energy levels and things like that. So I think it's kind of actually a hot area in technology, is some of those sorts of things. So,
and then there's a chat going on about tracking personal time, and think it would be an awakening. Maybe I could become more productive at home. Either that or plan to plant crops in the dust in my home.
Anybody know who this is?
I would say Eisenhower.
It's Eisenhower, that's right. When I share this in Kansas, people always know. So the reason that I bring this up is because of this matrix, which I find useful, and it's called the Eisenhower matrix, because he obviously had big decisions to make when he was president during a time of war, lots of important decisions to make. But so this is called the Eisenhower decision matrix, and it's Stephen Covey, who wrote the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He shared the Eisenhower matrix too. So this kind of goes on, and it may be something that you have seen before, used before, but it has you look at the things you do. So let's say you kept a time log. You might then want to plug it into this matrix and look at the things that you're doing that are important and urgent. So if they're important and urgent, you need to do them now. So if someone has fainted in the library, you need to address that right then. Important and not urgent, those are the things that we schedule. We put into our schedule, we plan for them. And then things that are urgent but not important are often things that are kind of someone else's urgent, and so sometimes they need to be delegated. That might be the solution for those. And then some things are not important but not urgent, and also not urgent, and those are, I guess, what we would consider time wasters. It might be I don't know, social media, I sound like I'm down on social media, and I think social media can be great. It can do amazing things, but I also personally feel like sometimes that's where I have identified time waste for myself is spending a little bit more time there at times than I would like. So time management people, including Stephen Covey, will say that the top right quadrant is the sweet spot, that the more people are able to spend time in that quadrant, the better we feel. And depending on the nature of our position, it isn't maybe realistic to spend all of our time there, but if we do get to spend some time there, that we feel happier. So again, that's the things where you're putting them into your schedule, you've got time to work on them, they're not urgent, must be taken care of right now, but they're things you're planning for and you're working towards. So I've got a question on that one. Where do you spend your time in Eisenhower's matrix, and would you like to make changes? So any thoughts on that, as you think about, especially in the library, where you spend time in the matrix? That sounds in the matrix. In the Eisenhower matrix.
Right. I think a lot of time that, and as a public librarian, is hard to manage is the urgent but not important. It's the patrons coming up for those. Where's the bathroom? Where's, you know, I need this, you know, it's urgent because they need their help right away. But it's not necessarily, you know, it's not gonna, if it's not important. It is important for the patron, but it's not necessarily important for you. And so that takes you away from your important but not urgent planning or whatever you're doing. Candy Crush for the quadrant 4. I spend quite a lot of time in the not important urgent area. I need to delegate that out more. Yeah, I could see that, you know, because they come to you, so you want to address it right away, and sometimes you just have to be like, I'm going to take you, or I'm going to send you to the person that can help you with that. I'm not sure where I spend it, but I really like the concept. And is there a formula for time management for the multitasker? For example, right now it's webinar, scanning documents, and sorting courier labels.
So let's see. Well, they say that multitasking just doesn't work. So I think that it's finding ways to actually, yes, break down the time so that you're actually focusing, even if it's short bursts of time on different things. But
what I'm a multitasker too, but I've had to identify things that I can't multitask and do. So working on a webinar, being a moderator, I have to make sure that my email is put away so I'm not distracted during the webinar.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of more of identifying where you can multitask and where you need to set that multitasking.
Mary Beth, in being a good time manager, are we going until 11 or are we scheduled until 12?
I scheduled our workshop till 12.
Okay.
So if we had a lot of questions, we could go. It doesn't mean we have to go till 12, but I did schedule it till 12.
Yeah, good. So good. That makes me feel better. Okay, and then of course we're recording it, so if people have to drop off at different times, they've got it. Okay. Okay. One thing, so I think there are different ways that this can be useful. I don't necessarily actually put this down on paper and fill out the quadrants very often, but I do often, as I'm just kind of filtering things that come through in my email inbox or in other ways, I do kind of plug them into this, and it helps me in the moment be like, yeah, this is urgent, but it's not my urgent. This is someone else. I need to, not own that. And again, and to remember that the important, not urgent, so there's something appealing about being able to focus on things. I also think it can be useful to help others. So if you're a manager or you have other staff, again, I think talking about these things can be really helpful. So if you have staff and you've kind of observed things about their time management, you might use this as a way to just have a conversation about things that maybe you see they're focusing time on that are not important, but maybe they're viewing them as important, or maybe there's something that they're treating as not important that actually should be a priority. It's just a place to kind of have that. It gives you a tool to have that conversation.
That's good. Another comment, I feel like I live in the urgent important. I need to learn to delegate and not let other people dictate what is actually important. I think that's a good point. Somebody else's urgent does not need to make it your urgent as well.
Yeah.
I'm planning to learn to delegate the less important. This morning, while doing this workshop, I did my urgent important bake deposit, packed a return to UPS, and then let somebody else take them to their destination. So that's an important accomplishment. I think that finding the stuff that absolutely you have to do and breaking up those tasks and things, I have to get the bank deposit ready, but I can send that to somebody else to the bank or something along those lines.
Yeah. I feel like I absolutely agree. And I know myself working in a public library which I used to, I feel like I spent lots of time in that important urgent quadrant too. And I kind of loved it, like when you're juggling things and you're really helping people and you're, doing this, doing that, there's adrenaline that goes along with that, and it feels really good. I think that it's maybe not, well, we're going to talk about breaks in a little bit, and so it certainly makes those ultra important. So yeah, I think I don't think that's a place to avoid the important and urgent, or that we can't when we're in public service positions, especially that's what it's going to be. But if we also have needs to do things other than those things, that we need to be able to have time off desk or offline where we can be focusing on those things too.
I have another question. I feel like I need to meet our teacher/patrons' needs immediately. So I'm a prisoner to email. How do I break that?
Yes, email. That is, I think, one of the greatest time management challenges, is that feeling that we need to respond to something that is emailed to us immediately. So people have different ideas about this, and I don't know that there's a right or wrong. I think we kind of set those expectations and allow others to set those expectations around us too, and so maybe sometimes we need to step back and question whether that's realistic. Because if you are constantly at the mercy of your email inbox and that's your day, so you might go into your day with a to-do list, things that are priorities to you to accomplish, and instead 3 things pop up in your email inbox, and instead your day is shaped around those, then that's frustrating, because you're not getting to spend time in that important, not urgent quadrant as much as you want and need to. So you just constantly feel like you're not getting done what you need to get done. So I think I myself have this problem too, but I think it's getting realistic about, so if someone emails you, I don't think it's that the expectation necessarily has to be that you must get back to them within the hour, or that you must even get back to them that day. What if you loosened whatever your parameter is around that? So if you have been trying to respond immediately, is it actually something where you could respond, have a certain time of day where you're going to respond to those things? Or could you establish, 24 hours that you feel like within 24 hours you can that's a legit thing? And for some things, I have kind of pushed myself into thinking I will respond within the week to this. If it really is not urgent, but it's maybe just other people's expectations, at some point, good time management is not all about pleasing other people. And again, I'm saying this for myself and my own lessons learned, but people sometimes will think, oh, she's written a book on time management. She does these workshops on time management, and they expect that I'm going to be perfect with time management, which of course I'm not, but I'm I also might not be prioritizing the same things that they're prioritizing. So if it's my boss, if it's someone who's having me do a project, then we need to have a talk about that and what's realistic. But I think if we feel that we need to be responding to things immediately, which I know people who do feel like that, I think that's just, it's so frustrating. So
Yeah. I used to check email all the time, and I still check it quite often, but I've set parameters of when I will and will not check it. So once I'm home for the day, I try not to check my work email when I'm home. Try to set those boundaries. But another thing, Sherry, that might be helpful for you is doing an automatic response that says, thank you for your inquiry. I will get back to you, as soon as I can, or, I'll check it like at, my email at a certain time. If this is urgent, please call me, or something along those lines, so that you can help them kind of filter themselves. They're like, oh yeah, when she gets to it, that's fine. And then, oh, it needs to be now. So then, you can call it then. That sometimes works. But yeah, it's kind of, you have to figure out what your parameters are and what your boundaries are that you can enforce on that.
And I think a couple of the other strategies that we're going to talk about will be relevant too. So let's keep, I'm going to make myself a note actually at 2 of those so that I remember to talk about them. Okay. Email. Good. Okay. All right, so we did that one. Okay, so let's talk about some of these strategies. So one of them, and this is, we're up to number 4 on your handout, is habits and routines. And there's a book that so eye-opening for me called The Power of Habit, Why We Do What We Do in Life and Business. And it says lots of things, lots of research about how we develop habits. But the thing that really sticks out to me from this is, what can we make a habit? What can we make a routine? Because the more that things become, not something you're making a choice about in the moment, but really just become part of, well, this is what we do now, this is when we do this. I think that can really help us feel less stressed, or we can be on autopilot with things where it's okay to be on autopilot, and it kind of frees our mental energy a little bit. And I know, I just have thought, as I think about my own time working in the library, you have the opening procedures. You just do that. You do the same things every day. Everybody does the same things every day. Same thing with closing the library. Same things you do every day. Lots of libraries have maintenance sorts of things. There's the daylight savings time, the firefighters and their push for using, when the time changes, daylight savings, to change your batteries in your fire detectors at that time. So just building in those habits and routines so that we don't have to be like wondering, I wonder how long it's been since the less we're carrying that stuff in our head and just trusting that it's part of our systems, I think the better. So if you can find ways to make things routine, things that come up frequently, or where it would be helpful to have that. I've certainly heard people say this with exercise, that if it stops being a daily choice, will I exercise today, or where will I find time to exercise today? But if it's just, I go to my Zumba class, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings, and that's just what I do. That's just my routine, and it can take a while, like a month, I would say, I think is what I've read, to actually make something a habit or a routine. But on the toothbrush, if you're wondering why there's a toothbrush on there, that's an example that he uses in that Power of Habit book, is he talks about how was it World War II? It was, I can't remember now which war it was, but that the military started promoting dental hygiene and really excuse me, got the soldiers to brush their teeth in the morning and at night, like brushing their teeth 2 times a day. That was not something that had been a part of people's daily routines before that, but that's when that habit started. And now, we hardly think about that, whether we're going to brush our teeth, because it's just been ingrained in what we've heard from the dentist and in school and our parents. So anything that you can think of that can help with that. And I think also sometimes there are things that can be automated as a way to not have to think about them so much either. So maybe any of those things that people are emailing you about that you need to help with, are there any of those things where you could develop a web page that had the information they're asking for, and then you can just quickly send them a link back that says, you know, oh great, yeah, I'd love to do that, here's where you schedule that, or here's the information on how to do that. Anything that you can make more systematic that comes up a lot, it can really help. It can help you not I'm sorry about my clearing my throat, but I think it can really help it just feel better. So I don't know if anyone has examples off the top of your head about the routines in your library work or in your life, and what you already have, or else what else could become part of your routine. I'm going to mute for a second and see if anyone has anything that you think of. I said the opening, closing, and maintenance. It could be for example, the library board might have their calendar, and in January the library board does this, in February the library board does this, you know, anything like that that keeps things rolling. Okay, well, I'm going to keep going, but something I think just to think about is there anything that, oops. Okay. Oops. Are you hearing me, Mary Beth? I think
Yes.
I blipped out for a second. Okay.
Yep, I can hear
good.
you.
Okay, great. So one of the most popular task management or time management strategies is to-do lists. And I've seen all sorts of ways that people do to-do lists. They keep little notebooks or post-it notes or a document on their computer. It could be an app on their phone like Evernote, or there are lots of different apps that people are using for this. So I'd be curious in the chat, how do you keep track of your to-dos? Do you keep track of, do you have a to-do list, and then how do you do it? Is it post-it notes? Is it a notebook? Is it an app?
Well, I'll fill in while people are chatting or typing in the chat. I use my iPhone reminders for stuff that I have to remember to do at a certain time. You know, or something that I've had on my to-do list and I keep forgetting to do it. So then I set a reminder so it reminds me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also have a note with my to-do list, just stuff I need to make sure I get through to the day, not necessarily urgent but important. So stuff like, if I get to this, I can do this, 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 and this. And it's very satisfying to cross something off my to-do list.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, we do have one. I have a to-do list on Google that has everything I need to do for the month, and I check them off as I do them. And Eric says, oh yes, big old planner that has a to-do on the top half and then the daily schedule on the bottom half. I just can't seem to get the same effectiveness from digital tools.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I use Google Tasks to keep track of certain things, but I still am also, I'm still my big planner, and I have these for years too. I keep them for some reason, and that actually has been useful because I've changed the apps that I use lots of times over the last several years. I probably have 10 years, at least 10 years of planners right now. And I've changed my app, so there's no way that I can think of that I could go back and easily recreate those. But if I keep kind of the big stuff in these daily planners, and so I can go back, and I'm pro paper still too. I like both digital, and I use a combo.
Another comment, I use Post-it notes. They are great for bigger items. I have it on my calendar, paper and cell phone. And then I really like Google, this is a reply to the big old planner. I really like Google tasks and Google Calendar.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the planner has been a huge turning point for my ability to feel ahead of the rush of the day.
Mm-hmm. Good. So there's a time management guru is The Getting Things Done by David Allen. Some of you may, and I think I put it in the, yes, in number 5 is building your system. So David Allen developed the Getting Things Done system, and his big kind of at the core of what he talks about is get things out of your head and into your system. That a lot of the stress or worry we carry around time management is because we're trying to keep too many things in our head, and that we have to have systems that we can plug them into, whether that's a paper system, whether it's a file, whether it's putting things in our calendar. And so his thing is to have systems where you're going to put things. Talk a little bit more about that.
I have one more comment. It's I email myself. So if I'm at the library, I email my home, and if I'm at home, I email the library. It works for her, and it helps keep track of where she's at and what she still needs to do.
Yeah, that's what I do too.
Another person says, I'm a paper person. I have a daily appointment book for my personal library school schedule, and then I have a daily list. I call it my brains, and mark what I need to do before work, during the morning at work, and through my lunch hour, and then afternoon and evening. I also list the major things for the next day so that I have it in mind all day. I love the thrill of marking stuff off my list. Yes.
Yes, I'm gonna, whoops, sorry. Yes, I've heard so many people say that they love, that's such a satisfying feeling to cross a finished item off the list. So it's a good incentive. Okay, so we've talked about lots of different systems that people have or ways that you're doing this, but having some sort of schedule and having some sort of way for tracking tasks is so key. Okay, so we've got calendars and we've got to-do lists. So thinking about David Allen, what he said about we have to have our systems. So you need a place to put your appointments or due dates. So you need a place to put tasks, and you need a place also to track more things that are more like ideas, where it doesn't have a place in your calendar yet. It's not really a task to do yet, but you don't want to forget it. So place to put those appointments, place to put those tasks, and a place to track ideas. So if you need something from the grocery store, do you have a place to put that? If you think about your own systems right now, if there's a phone call that you need to make, is there a reminder either on a to-do list or a schedule right now? If there's an idea you've been thinking about that you want to bounce off of your team in a meeting or your other people in the library, do you have that in a system somewhere, or is that something you're carrying in your head? David Allen, the Getting Things Done guy, says that if it will take less than 2 minutes, then often we should just do it. So I'm thinking about Sherry, and I'm thinking about the emails and feeling that need to be so responsive to emails. One suggestion that I would throw out there, and this might not work, but one suggestion is to set times when you're going to do email. So maybe it's right when you arrive in the morning, maybe it's 2 hours later, and then turn it off in between those. But when you do then go through your email, if it's quick things that are going to take less than 2 minutes, just do them. Respond to the question, whatever it is. But if it's something that would require you to shift your schedule and what you were planning to do in order to do it, is it urgent and important, or is it something important but not urgent, where you could actually shift that into your system and do it at a time where it allows you to still do what you were planning to do for that day, if that makes sense. It just can help you feel like you have more control of your time, instead of feeling like you're every time you hear the ding, if you have an audible cue when you get an email, every time you hear that, then you feel pulled to that, then it's really hard to stay focused on the things that you intended to get done. And again, if it's urgent, important, then you'll need to take care of it. But I think the more that we can put things into our system, or the more things we can make, or the more we can make things more systematic or routine, where we have like an email already prepared. So if it's a question you get all the time, then have an email, or like I said, a web page where you can then say, that's a great idea, here, take a look at this. Kind of respond to it quickly, as much as you can. This is, as we think about how to do this in the flow of being out in the public. So I think lots of what you read in time management books and articles and things is written for people who have desk jobs, where they are spending a lot of their day in an office at a desk. And that a lot of it does not fit for libraries, because lots of what you're doing is out on the floor, and you're kind of, the public is changing maybe what you thought you would do from minute to minute, or you're responding to them, is what your job is about at that time. So this is an example. An example is a youth librarian, and she was trying to get more organized about getting things out of her head and into her systems. But so she tried apps, but she didn't feel comfortable. She often had to go from the staff area to the children's area, walking across the library, and she didn't feel comfortable having her phone out and using the app she had on her phone while she was on the public floor. And that may have even been a library policy. So that is a thing that may shift over time. It may become so, and maybe it has, maybe staff do have their phones out in the library, I'm not sure. But right now, for a lot of libraries, I know that it does feel like you shouldn't have your personal phone out on the public floor. And so she would forget things as she moved from staff area to children's area. And so what she ended up doing is just carrying a little notebook where she was jotting things down. And then when she would be at her desk, then she would move it from the little notebook into her system. If it was a little thing that would take less than 2 minutes, then she could just do that thing. But if otherwise, she would schedule things or add them to her to-do list. So I think in libraries, time management is a little bit different because of that. And so thinking about what actually will work for you, your flow, is important. So I talked about routines and habits and how useful that can be. Schedules are also so important. And if you want something to happen, schedule it, is the saying that you'll hear a lot. And so lots of things in the library are already scheduled, thank goodness. So when you open and when you close, when you get paid, maybe when you have staff meetings, lots of things are already scheduled. And like I said, thank goodness, because it would be awful if all the time it was for important things like that, it was, well, what do we have time for today? That nothing would get done. So the more that you can actually plug things into your schedule, the more likely they are to get done. So if you think about things that are kind of loosey-goosey right now, is there anything that you could actually plug into your schedule and make it more consistent? This is an example that I've seen in libraries in the last few years. Instead of posting to social media from the library accounts, instead of posting to social media kind of when they have a good idea or when they have a spare moment, instead they schedule it. So they go in and they're like, okay, we're going to make a Facebook post about new books every Monday. We're going to, maybe it would go both Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whichever social media you're using. But it takes away, it not only helps this actually happen, but I think it also takes away some of that kind of nagging feeling about the shoulds. Oh, I should be posting to social media, but I never seem to get around to it. If you can just plug it into your calendar, then you're going to be more likely to actually do it. And also from the user perspective, or your library patrons or your community members, they kind of can get, it becomes part of their routine too, maybe, to oh, let's see what the library is posting, or here's the library newsletter. I'm excited to get that every month so I can see what events are happening, that sort of thing. So the more things that you can take that really should be happening, it really is a priority, it's important, and they should be happening, but they just haven't been. Can you plug them into the schedule, or create a calendar, create a schedule so that they do actually happen?
And for a lot of these social media sites, you can schedule them to go out. So you always make all your Facebook posts on Mondays, but you can schedule story time to go on Tuesday, but you've written them all out at one time. And then you just schedule a date when they're actually posted. And that seems to help a lot when you have, like, I know I have time to do it now, and I know I will. So then you do it for the week or the month or whatever you need to.
So maybe I'll pause and just ask, either reflect on this, or if anyone has comments or questions as you think about your own use of to-do lists, calendars, schedules, anything you want to share that's working well for you, or anything you'd like to improve. Okay. I think I'll go on, and then if anything kind of comes to you, we'll have more time for questions and discussion as we go too. Okay, so our next topic is rest and relaxation, and how important this is. Kind of practicing self-care. And I think it's something to think about personally, but also as part of your library's culture, the workplace culture. So back to Daniel Pink and his research on timing that I mentioned in the beginning. So for lots of us, there's this afternoon trough. And he also talks about, well, what can we do about that trough? And the best remedy is to take a nap. To take a brief nap. I think it was something like 18 minutes or something like that. So if you can take a nap in the afternoon, then that is ideal. However, not realistic for lots of us. But what they have found in this research also is that a break, even a brief break, can have the same kind of effect that a brief nap could have. So, but the breaks cannot be just sitting at your desk and sort of continuing to work, but maybe in a less focused way. For the breaks to be effective, getting up and moving around is better than just staying at your desk. And again, this is talking like you have desk jobs, which I know lots of you are not sitting at a desk all day. If you can, step outside, and that can have a really positive impact on your mental state, on your energy, on your mood. And if possible, if you can also make it a break from your tech. So instead of using your break and looking at your phone, instead to use it as a chance, get up, step outside, kind of breathe and relax. And then that can have about the same positive impact as that brief nap. That would be ideal, but that doesn't work with lots of our lives.
I'll add to that. When I'm working on a project that you get to that plateau where you're not making the progress anymore and you're getting frustrated with it, then I say, okay, I'm going to walk around the building, and I just go up and I walk around the building. It takes 5 minutes or less. But usually if it's sunny out or whatever, just a little bit of sunshine, just a little bit outside helps. And if you need the excuse, I gotta walk the building anyway to pick up trash or whatever cleanup or maintenance you need to do for the building, just that excuse helps me to get up and go.
Yeah, me too. I saw that Emporia State, I saw an article in the newspaper that Emporia State they'd installed napping cubicle sorts of things all around campus. They'd installed these areas where students can actually go in and take a nap.
I saw that too.
Yeah.
When I was taking some psychology classes, and one of the things they talked about is when you are intensely using your brain. So if you're studying or if you're really working hard and you get that, like, I can't keep my eyes open feeling, when you get that feeling, take 8 minutes and just separate yourself, go find a quiet place and just close your eyes. You don't even have to really nap. And that is actually like resetting your brain, and you're almost like soaking in everything that you just did. And I started doing that when I'd have really long study sessions, and I felt more refreshed, and I felt like I was retaining a lot more of the information.
Yeah.
So that was helpful for me.
An 8-minute pullback or whatever you want to call it. I like
just
that
an
idea.
8-minute, close your eyes, don't, just stop doing everything that you're doing and just close your eyes for 8 minutes. And it helped.
And I think that the public library, especially at really busy times, it is intense. Any library, I suppose, has its busy times, but it is intense when you are out and interacting with the public. And like I said earlier, that can be wonderful. Like you can feel kind of like you're helping and you're doing all of these things, and that can be part of what you love about the library. But also you just cannot do that for hours and hours at a time. You need to really take these breaks and give yourself kind of off away from people just for a little bit. Although Daniel Pink does say that if you can be social on these breaks, so like if you and a coworker go out and take a little walk, that has been found to be really restorative too. So, and I think again, this will be very individual. What works for one person might be different for another person, depending on lots of things. So that's little breaks throughout the day, but then also using your vacation days. So just as those little breaks help with concentration, long breaks improve with your overall job performance. And what they've found, I've become, the older I get, I've become more of a fan of the staycation, where we actually stay home instead of going somewhere. Maybe it's also having a young child, but that stressful vacations do not have the same positive effect on kind of your overall feelings of being recharged. Although the research did find that if you do something new, so you take a vacation and you go somewhere you've never been, or you learn a new skill, that can be mentally a recharge. So something to think about is that wake up effect for your brain can give you kind of a creative mental boost. So if that's what you're seeking, then doing something different might be good. But if you're just looking for really relaxing, finding ways to do that are actually relaxing is good. So another thing with this, I think, because there are things we can do on an individual level with this, but I also think it just really needs to be part of a library's organizational culture, that people are working smarter, not harder, so it's not kind of one-upping each other on who's working the most hours or anything like that. And libraries are much better about this than maybe certain other fields. But so really promoting this healthy culture where people are taking their breaks, and that's encouraged, where people are using their vacation time, and that's encouraged, and kind of working together to reduce stress. So feeling like you're in it together, I think is an important part of the workplace culture. And I think if you are the boss or manager, that you set the tone for this. And we can feel like we cannot get away, that, oh, if I come back, it will just be more stress than ever. But I think we have to find ways to make it work, with scheduling these breaks and scheduling so that we don't come back and things are more stressful than ever, but that we come back and we're refreshed, and it was okay for us to be away for a little bit, and things worked. My husband works for a school system, and he's a social worker, and his job is so intense, and thank goodness for the Christmas, the holiday breaks that they get, and the summer break, because I see his kind of flow throughout the year. It's almost always easier to see with someone else these sorts of things. But I think that libraries need to be good about this too. And I think you're seeing this more and more. People are becoming more aware of how important this is, kind of to take care of ourselves, take care of each other.
Yeah, and I think, summer reading is summer library program is a very intense time for our libraries. And so I think when you're scheduling your year and looking at your programming, take August off. There's no programming at the library in August because you just got through summer library program. Kind of think about those things where you're still coming to work, of course, and you're still doing the library thing, but you've taken a break. And maybe you need to do that if you have your Christmas season, you have a lot of stuff going on. Maybe in January you take a little break from that as well. So they're kind of like, that's when school starts. Yeah. Sherry says that's when school starts is in August, so you can't take a break. But maybe there's those down times, right after school lets out, but before summer reading starts, maybe that's a good time to we're not going to have any dead week, I think is what the colleges call it, right before finals, they have dead week where nothing is scheduled, and kind of have some kind of dead week at the library where nothing is scheduled.
So I'd be curious if there's any thoughts on this, things that you are doing that have been working, things that you'd like to do. I've seen libraries do things like staff being more intentional about health, like physical health, mental health, and doing things like setting goals for walking, setting goals for getting up and moving around, doing some of those things together. I saw a library that was doing a yoga class for staff, so I think it was once a month or something. They were having someone do like 15-20 minutes of yoga stretches at their staff meeting. So anything that you've seen or heard or that you're doing or that you think would be good to do? Also, the area where people take their breaks, is it a peaceful area? Is it a place where people really can disconnect? Anything on that? Okay. And again, feel free, if you think of things, feel free to share them. I'm going to keep going. The next thing I wanted to talk about is reflection and making time for reflection. And this is actually a part of the getting things done philosophy too, is one of the things to schedule. So we talked earlier about how important it is to schedule things, is to schedule a chunk of time at least weekly to go over your task lists and plan for the days and weeks ahead. I know someone mentioned in the chat that they do this, that they, at the end of the day, plan what they're going to do the next day. And I think that is so powerful. And it actually really does not take that long, especially if you are doing it regularly. Then it's maybe the first time you do it, kind of trying to sift through all of the different possibilities is time consuming. But then once you've done that and you really have your priority list, you've got your task list, you kind of know what's coming, then spending that time reflecting. And I like to do it, some people do it in the morning, but I like to do it at the end of the day. So I like to look at, okay, what do I need to accomplish tomorrow? Sometimes that will change, like we talked about, because I received some emails that mean I need to make something else urgent, important. But overall, I like to have that goal for the next day. And then I'm not as good at this one, but I do think that when I do take the time to do it, it's really powerful, is to spend a chunk of time like on a Friday and to think about the week ahead and really reflect on what you want to get done then too. Or it could even be for the month ahead. Do this on a monthly basis and really be kind of making sure you've got the things that you need to have in your schedule to make those happen, making sure that you've pulled things and put them on your to-do list. So you've got those, so you're kind of on top of what you're working on. And And then the third one, organizing your workspace. That is definitely not a strength of mine, but it is so helpful when I do that. And again, I said a big part of David Allen's philosophy with getting things done is that you need to have your systems. And so those can be digital and those can be analog, those can be paper. And so for me, what that looks like when I'm at my best is I've got paper folders for every big project I'm working on, and then also digital repositories or places to put either ideas or important documents, so that I'm just keeping things organized and everything's not just a kind of jumble of all of the different stuff that I have to do. The little bit of time it takes to organize your workspace and then to maintain that organization, I think pays off so much. And if you have let it get out of control, if it's, then taming it will take time. That will take some time. But if you're maintaining and you're scheduling that time to maintain, then that can really make a big difference.
I have a couple comments.
Okay.
One was a follow-up. My Fitbit tells me to get up and move if I haven't gotten 250 steps in an hour. No, those Fitbits really keep you going. And then we have, I need to schedule time to organize my workspace, which I replied, I have to give myself permission to take that time.
Yes.
Well, I need to be doing this instead, but no, it's okay to take that time.
Yeah.
Get yourself organized so you can work again.
And I think that the time that you get back, because you won't be like looking for things, and the energy that you get back because things are just in their system where they're supposed to be, it's worth it. It pays off. And ultimately your performance and your time and task management will be better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Finding focus, which is a big and really important part of time management, is finding focus, time to focus, and kind of if you're working with focus, I think you have a clear sense of direction, you follow through, you're able to stay on track. And even brief periods of focus, time to work on things can help you feel happier, can help you actually make things happen. So I think that we need time, and we also need to think about our physical spaces and how to make them more conducive to focus. So I'm going to talk about distractions, and I'm also going to talk about interruptions. I'll talk about distractions first, and this is things that distract you. And when we mentioned the email, if you have that auditory some sort of sound or something, it could be a visual cue. If you have those cues when you get a new email and you immediately go look, and when you stop and think about it, you really don't have to respond in the moment, or you don't feel like that's a realistic expectation of you, then then that's a distraction. If you're trying to work on a presentation that you're going to give, or a report that you have to write, or a grant that you're trying to apply for, and you get pulled into social media, not in an intentional way, but more as that's a distraction. And so I think that finding focus is in part about overcoming those distractions. And it can help for lots of people to set task-focused time goals. And this is the Pomodoro technique, is very simple but can be really powerful. And so you choose a task that you're going to complete, and then you set an intention to work on it for 25 minutes, and then you're going to take a short break, and then every 4 Pomodoros take a long break. In my experience, lots of people working in libraries don't get to have 4 Pomodoros. They don't have that much time. However, I think that the 25 minutes, that hopefully you can find the places in the flow where you can get 25 minutes to really work on things that you need to do. So, and there are online tools. You can, of course, use a kitchen timer. We talked earlier about things causing anxiety. That I have tried the actual tomato timer like this, and it clicks, and that causes me a lot of stress. And so I don't want any auditory ticking of time going by. But Tomato Timer is a website, so nothing that you need to install, but it can track your Pomodoros for you, or you can just use your phone and do it that way, or you could use a clock, although you couldn't set a timer with that. So I think set your timer to 25 minutes and then don't let yourself get distracted. If your intention is to work on XYZ, then during those 25 minutes, you're not going to let yourself do anything. You're not going to check email. You're not going to go look at social media. You're not going to do anything else. You're going to set 25 minutes. And that's why, this is part of why I think it's good to talk about this as a staff, because you also need to let staff know that you're doing this. So if you all have talked about this technique and have acknowledged the need for focused times, then you can say, kind of get it out there that would be actually one benefit of having the actual tomato timer, is then you could point to it and say, I'm doing a Pomodoro right now. But if you have talked about it, then you can say, if someone comes to you with something, you could say, not a patron, I'm talking about other staff, but you can say, I'm focusing on this for 25 minutes and then I'll come find you. So finding focus is, it's needed. There's so much work that needs to happen that you just cannot, you will always feel frustrated or stressed out if you're trying to just go into it with 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 even minutes of distracted time. But if you really focus for 25 minutes, I think people are often amazed at how much they can move ahead on things with even that amount of time. So this is a librarian who loved this. And actually her problem was, and I think this is the Fitbit telling you to get up and walk around, is that sometimes people will get so into a task that they dive heads into it and they keep working on it until they're bleary-eyed and can hardly function. So getting up and taking those little breaks and then going back into it, if you have that option, is really good and can help keep your energy and kind of keep your mind in a good place too. And it can help lower stress. So this is another comment from a library staff person who took the online course that I teach, but she said Pomodoro is great for home, that she found this really useful for like tackling household chores, but at work it was really rare to find 25 uninterrupted minutes. And I think if you have a desk in a public space, if you have people coming to you all the time, that it can be really hard, but then that's also really frustrating. So is there any way that you can find or create those 25 minutes if you need them? If you have things that are not urgent but that are important that you want to accomplish, finding focused time is essential for those. And so I think we're beating ourselves up sometimes for not getting things done when our environment is just making it impossible. So again, talking about it, creating space where you can do it. This is kind of like Pomodoro, but it's a little bit different. It's a different angle, and it's something called time boxing. And what it is you focus on the amount of time instead of the task. And so this works well for things like, so I subscribe to CanLib, the email list for the state, and I have intentions of reading it all the time, but what happens is I sometimes get, I don't, and so I'll have in my email inbox, I'll have 12 to 15 CanLib digests that have piled up in there. So what I could do is, instead of feeling like reading CanLib is my task, instead I'll make it about the time, and I'm going to spend 3 minutes every day scanning CanLib, or I'm going to spend 20 minutes every week scanning this. It can help with perfectionism, time boxing can. So if you if you have a tendency to kind of work on things until they're A plus, and you do that with everything, you just are going to be exhausted. If there are some things that you just need to get done and it is not going to make a difference, it's a box to check. It's not a thing that needs to be A plus, but you find yourself spending so much time to make it, it might help to do time boxing on that. So to be like, I'm going to spend 30 minutes on that. Whatever I have at the end of 30 minutes is what I'm moving forward with. Again, if you manage staff or if you see other staff who are struggling with time management, this might be something to talk about with them too. So if someone is doing a task that you feel, especially if you're their manager, if you feel like it's a task that you'd really like to see it get done in an hour, but instead they're really being a perfectionist about it, being way too attentive to details in ways that they don't need to be, and it's taking them, hours and hours instead, then that might be a thing to talk about with them, is just, I'd like to see that take about an hour, and it doesn't matter if blah, blah, blah. So time boxing is about just making it about the amount of time that is going to be spent on it, and then being satisfied with that. I don't know if any questions on that, but this kind of goes.
A couple
okay,
comments
good.
on there. Sorry, I was muted.
Yep, no, that's okay.
So Amy says that she does the Pomodoro technique, but she does it with 2 tasks at a time because she's just a multitasker.
Yep.
So her joke is, does that make me Pomodoro adjacent? And then Smith Center says that I have a huge to-do task list at home. So I set a timer for 15 minutes and I focus on one task until that timer goes off, so nothing interrupts. And then she gives herself a break time for the same amount, and she could do something fun. Yeah. And then just kind of check them off one at a time, but not make it so tedious that you avoid it.
Yeah, it's so good for those things that you've been putting off because they're kind of boring or you're not quite sure where to start. So if it's like for expense reports, if I do a trip and I'm getting reimbursed for expenses, that's the kind of thing I put off. But when I just make myself focus on it, I can get it done in 20-25 minutes. But also sometimes we avoid things that we aren't sure exactly how to get started. So if you've got something kind of big and you've been avoiding it for that reason, if you're just like, well, I'm just going to spend 25 minutes on it. And that, of course, you're not going to accomplish it in that time, but it can get you started. And that can be important just to get things rolling instead of procrastinating them. I mentioned was there anything else, Maribeth?
I think we're caught up. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Well, so I did it when I first started back in, maybe it was 2011. I think when I started my son was born in 2010. So I think it was probably then actually that I started becoming obsessed with time management. But I started doing work on it and thinking about it in the work context. And so I did a survey and surveyed people working in libraries all over the country and asked about time management challenges, and I'm sure it will not surprise you that the #1 time management challenge for people working in libraries, according to that survey, was interruptions. And to a certain extent, I think that's unavoidable because as we talked about earlier, what's in that top quadrant of the Eisenhower matrix, the urgent and important, is often people coming into the library who have needs. That's probably your top priority. It is important, and so you're going to spend time in that quadrant. But if you have other things that you need to do, other not urgent but important things that you need to do, which almost all of us do, then you need to be able to find a way to have that uninterrupted focus time. And so again, this is going to vary from person to person and library to library. And I think, is there a way for you to communicate unavailable and available time? So if you're the director and you want to work on your board report, and staff are coming to you with things that that are not urgent, but are things that you could handle after, in half an hour as well as you can handle in the moment, then can you somehow communicate that you're focusing and that you need to do this, and then you'll check in with them? Or if you have your system, so when someone comes in and says, I have this question for you, then you can jot it down so you don't forget to follow up with them, but then you can say, okay, I'm working on this report, and as soon as I finish, I'm going to come find you. And if someone sees you jotting it down and you establish that you follow through on things like that, then I think that the unavailable, saying you're unavailable, becomes a little bit less elusive. And yeah, setting parameters for interruptions. So if it's an emergency, come and get me. But if it's not, I'm going to be focused on this, and let's talk about anything that comes up when I get back from doing this focused thing. It might be that you have an office, but it might be some staff space that is conducive to focused attention. And as we talked about earlier, being aware of workplace activity trends. So as you do your time log, or even just as you pay attention to kind of the flow of the day, are there times when there's lots of workplace activity and it's not a good time to find that focus? Then are there times when it's quieter and it is a good time to find that focus? Or it actually might be when you have more staff, then that's a good time for you to pull away and do the focus thing that you need to do. So I think, again, I feel like this is all stuff that needs to be talked about, and that trying to do it on your own is really hard, but if you can start to establish this culture of recognizing that people need breaks, but also recognizing that people sometimes have work that requires them to focus, then kind of working together to figure out how to make that happen. I don't know if anyone has said anything in the chat yet, but one thing that I have heard in different scenarios, but kind of along the same lines, of a co-worker who chats a lot and is chatting about social life or personal life sorts of things, and does it so much that it becomes, because to a certain extent, wanting to maintain a good workplace, wanting to be a good person who's, seeing our coworkers as humans and, knowing each other a bit, those are good things. But if it's to the point where it's interrupting with your ability to focus and your ability to do what you do, then again, I think that's the kind of thing that if you are openly talking about time management and your things you're doing, then it can work to put on headphones and then just to say, I'm trying this thing where the Pomodoro, I'm trying this tomato timer, so I'm going to focus on this, and then I'm going to check in with you later, I'll chat with you later. Somehow directly addressing it, instead of feeling, again, like you're at the mercy of it. Again, if it's patrons and you are on the public floor, then I think that's harder. I mean, I think that we can still, if you have someone who is chatty, I feel like in part that's part of our jobs is to be, you might be the only person that someone talks to that day, and it's an important part of what libraries do, is that helping people feel connected. However, you may have people who are really chatty and it just becomes too much, and so kind of finding ways to gracefully set some parameters, I think, is important too. So letting people feel seen, feel heard, feel connected, but that, I think, being able to feel like you have some control over and the ability to set some parameters around that.
Yeah.
Okay. So are you seeing anything?
Nope.
Okay.
There's no more questions on the chat right now.
Okay, so we've talked about our 7 topics, which is timing and paying attention to your own flow, your own energy, your own kind of mental space, and when you're good at what. Tracking how you spend your time so you become really aware of how long things take you, or whether or not you're you're spending time on the things that are your priorities, actually identifying those priorities. And that's where we talked about that Eisenhower matrix, which I think can be so useful to just kind of filter things through that a little bit. We talked about several time management strategies. So developing those systems, whether it's your to-do list, it's your calendar, it's having those systems so you're not trying to carry things around in your head, but you have a system to put them in. Rest is essential for our brains, for our energy, for our mood, finding ways to take those little breaks, finding ways to use vacation time. Reflection is so important too. Taking time to reflect on what are our priorities, what are our short-term priorities. So what am I going to accomplish today? What do I want to accomplish in the next week? Taking time to reflect can really help us feel like we're not just kind of running around trying to do so many things, but instead we're being thoughtful about what the priorities really are. And then focus, and focus is key. Finding ways to focus, things that we do on our own, and then also things that we kind of try to help establish as part of our workplace cultures. And I felt like, to me, those are 7 of the things that have kind of emerged to me as I work with people who work in libraries and try to focus on time management. So as a wrap up, I wanted to hear what you all are thinking about all of this. Is there anything that we've talked about that you'd like to try? Is there anything you've thought about that you might share with others in your library? Anything you want to research? Anybody realize they need to take a vacation? So if you would share in the chat kind of where you're at with this, and as you have chatted with others, or as you've heard me talking, or as you've looked at the handout, what's kind of your next step with this?
I'll fill in until people chat.
Okay, good.
I'm gonna try the Pomodoro technique with the 25 minutes of focus and then the 5-minute break. There's a lot of tasks that I have that take a lot of time, and I get overwhelmed with it. So I think this might be a good technique for me. I also like Danielle's suggestion of the 8-minute, I'm gonna call it a timeout, where you just go and sit and close your eyes for 8 minutes, and see how that helps me. I know that there's some bad habits that I'm going to have to retrain myself. So I'm going to have to, allow myself to fail on some of the techniques, where I'm still used to like leaving it in my head. And then if I don't remember it after a couple times, then I write it down. So retraining myself to write down those tasks right away, and just retraining myself a little bit.
Absolutely. Those are great. Let's see. Yes, slow down, doing too many things at once. That is so hard in the library, because you can feel like everything is important, and you cannot do it all. You cannot do everything. And so really kind of getting down to what the priorities for now are going to be. And then that can be part of your system, is the things that are going to be for later. Down the road, after I've done these things, then I'll come back and think about doing that thing, because the possibilities are endless. And I think that's what lots of us love about working in libraries, but also it can be overwhelming if you feel that pressure of, there's so much I'm not doing. I think time management, feeling better, is about feeling like you are doing good things and that you're really focusing on them and doing them well.
Yeah.
Being more organized with to-do lists too definitely can help.
I think sometimes our phones can be too handy of a distraction. Maybe we should put them out of reach, so we're making a conscious motion of getting up to go check them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the phones can help. I mean, we've talked about the Fitbit. We've talked about the different apps that can help. Lots of people use them for their calendar or their to-do list, so they can help with time management, but they also can become our biggest time management challenge. And so I think just finding ways to make them work for us and not for us to be kind of at their mercy all the time.
Yes. Another comment, to-do lists are wonderful. I always get a great deal of satisfaction from crossing off completed tasks.
Yeah.
Yes. There's
Me
just,
too.
and you can't, you know, I have my online one where I can check it off, but crossing it off by hand, that's just, that just is what gets that feeling, I've accomplished this today. So.
Yep. Or if you're one of the Post-it note people, when you can crumple up your Post-it note
And
because
throw
it's
it away.
Yep.
Yeah.
Some technique that I use sometimes with more at home than at the library is if I don't happen to do, like if I don't use a to-do list, I like to do like in the evening what I did list.
Oh.
And just go through my day and just kind of give myself some acknowledgement that yes, I actually did get some stuff done today.
Yeah.
So that's what I do sometimes.
I like that idea, Danielle.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. Well, as we wrap up, any questions that are still out there? Any things that you're wondering, or whether you would like to ask me, or maybe you'd just like to check in with others who are in the session too? Anything you'd like to ask each other or me?
We have a comment. Very helpful suggestions. Thanks.
Good. Great. Yeah, that's, you always have to make it worth people's time to come to the time management session.
Yeah.
I'll put my email address up, and I will also, someone asked about the slides earlier, so I'll send those to Mary Beth. So.
Okay, and I'll put them in that link that I've been sending out. It's a folder, so if you just go to that link, they will be put in there as soon as I have them. So, and I'll be archiving this workshop, so we'll have it posted. You can watch the video if you missed any part or want to go back to it. We'll have that as well.
Oops.
I honestly didn't know there were so many different ways to do time management, is one of the comments.
Oh, good.
It really is finding what works for you.
Yeah.
And sometimes it has to be kind of like a hybrid of a bunch of different ways, but what works for you?
Yeah, and I think that's talking about it, that we talk a lot about how busy we are maybe, or how tired we are, and maybe not everyone does, but I hear a lot of that, and I do a lot of that. It feels more constructive to me to talk about, well, how can we make this better? What can we use? What works for you? Or if you see someone who you feel like just gets so much stuff done, ask them, you know, how do you manage your projects, or how do you juggle all this? And not just, you know, nitty gritty, ask them what tools do you use, or what, because again, it's something that you can learn, and we can all be learning and developing our strategies always.
Another comment, this is a workshop I need to find time to watch again when the library is closed and no staff members are asking me questions, or I can hear the phone ringing and the patrons' questions. Yes, I think this workshop has a lot of good ideas, and we'll make sure that it's posted so when you need to come back to it, you can.
Great. Okay.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, and thank you again for having me do this. This was really fun.
Yes, thank you, Brenda. I appreciate your time, and if any questions come to me for you, I will send them to you, but we'll make sure that they have your email address as well.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you very much, Brenda. Thank you,
All
everyone.
Right. Bye-bye.